Origins were released back with Federations, and they are definitely one of the more interesting mechanics within the game because it really sets up everything. Now, it was only a question of time until we got more of these, and with the story pack of Necroids, we've got one, and oh boy, is it a doozy. The Necroids, specifically the Necrophages, have themselves their own unique origins, and it is very good. In terms of good, well, it is incredibly flexible, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, because, well, Necrophages can be played in multiple ways, in multiple ethics, civics, etc. So let's dive right in and see what we have here. Now, I set up this particular empire already. It is, of course, the origin that we want. It is the Necrophage. Just to quickly put things into perspective here, a Necrophage means that the leader lifespan will have 80 years plus, which means that your pops will live significantly longer, up to 150, 160 years, which you can min-max with other particular techs as well as civics and traditions to get even more lifetime, to the point that you can get maybe 2 or 3 generations of leaders within your game until they die. This means that, well, the leaders don't really need to be able to do much more than lead. On top of that, ruler pop resources are increased by 5%. Specialists also by 5%. However, the ruler pops do not work well within resource gathering. They will have a reduction of 10% in their workers. And as we go over towards the Necrophage, that is listed down the bottom. What this basically translates to is that you will want to get a lot of workers that are specialized on using their abilities to resource your way up to the top, whether or not it's minerals, energy, or trade value. Food is, of course, another thing. Speaking of which, food is not really needed for Necrophages. They have a reduction of 75% because they really don't use any food at all. On top of that, pop growth speed has been reduced by 75%. Not that it really matters because the Necrophages add a special building that uplifts other species, at least your workers, to your own type. And that can be incredibly powerful. You will never need to grow your basic species, your Necrophages, as a species. The whole pop growth speed modifier does not really matter, because you can just uplift pops and get them that way. And of course, mineral upkeep is also reduced. And why are these so important? Well, it means that you can min-max your species quite well. First of all, Necrophages don't really need the ability of being able to experience their leadership particularly quickly, because they will live forever, which basically means that you can negate that with slow learners. That basically means that even though your leaders may not skill up as fast as some of the other empires, they will last a lot longer, which basically is a turtle versus the hare scenario, where you may be slow, but you will be better in the long run. Weak is also a great trait for the Necrophages because they are never really in worker pop resource output. So it's a -1 free bonus that you can spend on something else. Unruly, same thing there. Empire Sprawl from pops is kind of a default for me because, in all honesty, Empire Sprawl is but a number. What does this translate to? Well, intelligent, of course, one of the standard traits that you apply to a species, mainly because of the research bonus. And finally, extremely adaptive. Now, that may seem a little bit counterintuitive, but it's very important for your pops to be able to live wherever they can, because they are the leaders of your empire. Just because you start on a continental world does not mean that you'll do very well on desert worlds or arid worlds, for that matter. Being extremely adaptive makes sure that you can continuously invade other empires, take their planets, and then move your leaders over there whilst not being hit by any malices due to not being able to live there. And that's really important. In addition, similar to how the symbiotic species or syncretic evolution works, we have ourselves a secondary species. This is also the same for, say, assimilators. Now, species and all that stuff is all fine, appearance, etc. But what is really important about these is that they are are in fact rapid breeders. Having as many of these as possible is incredibly good, and being able to crank out more pups to get more resources is always nice, and it also offsets the growth into uplifting them to your main species. Very strong. Pup is mainly for pup resource output. Army damage doesn't really matter to me because, well, army damage plus 40% is not all that great. Fleeting doesn't matter because, well, these are never going to be leaders. These pups will never be leaders, and adding fleeting to them means that it's a free point because, again, even though leader lifespan is minus 40 years, it doesn't matter because they're never going to have any issues with that because they're never going to be leaders. And that's pretty much what that boils down to. Quarrelsome, unity, workers don't generate unity. Slow learners, again, it's a leader trait. But yeah, very strong and rapid breeders are incredibly good for this. If you want to, you can min-max these around and maybe remove very strong and add, say, industrious for mining, etc. Even though you can get robots and use the robot traits to get industrious instead by, you know, getting the mining drills, etc. Ingenious is maybe a good idea, as well as agrarian, just so that you can get that food. And this kind of puts you onto the track of getting genetic engineering relatively early, which means that you're going to need to go down the society path relatively quickly. Now, on top of that, we've got our governance and ethics. There's a couple of really interesting things you can do here. For instance, let's say you're an authoritarianist empire. It means you can have yourself some slaves together with some xenophobes, which is incredibly useful. You can min-max this as much as you want. Diplocore is incredibly useful because other empires will hate you. Byzantine bureaucracy is always nice for unity. But when it comes to this, you really have the pick of the pack. You can pick whatever you want, and that is incredibly useful. But it doesn't really stop there. Let's say we disable this and we go for fanatic xenophobe and a little dash of militarism. We can totally be barbaric despoilers. Barbaric despoilers actually work reasonably well with necrophages because of their ability to do bombardment and raiding. We'll go into that a little bit more later on. In addition to that, you can also play as fanatic purifiers. Yes, you can play as fanatic purifiers as necrophages. What does that translate to? Well, it translates to the ability of getting a special purge option. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that the special purge option basically says, hey, all the pups on this planet are going to be turned into necrophages. Yes, and there is a special purifier option that will turn all the pups into your pups on the planet. It's very similar to assimilation, except instead of a species being assimilated into their own subspecies of assimilation, they will be all turned into you. It is incredibly interesting because it does mean that you're going to need to focus quite a lot on robots to make things happen. And that's kind of interesting. I like that. It's very, very cool that this is a possibility. In addition, there is a very special type of necrophage. We're going to go and take a look at these now. This is the lithic domain. I've set them up earlier. Now, the thing is that necrophages can essentially synergize with any particular species that has traits attached to them. And there is only one type of that within the game, and that is lithoids. Lithoids have their own traits based on their portrait pack. So if we, for instance, go into the portrait pack here and go to appearance, as long as we select any of these, we will get special traits or access to special traits for lithoid necrophages. What does that translate into once again? Well, it translates to the fact that we can have a giant list of stuff, two of which are required ones that are essentially free. We get necrophages with plus 80 years, and on top of that, we get lithoids, which have an additional 50 years on top of that, a plus 40 habitability bonus, which completely offset any sort of extreme adaptability, which means you can do completely different things. Let's say we want to add unruly because of the empire sprawl from pups. Remove that completely. Add weak because, once again, they're never going to be working as workers or in armies. Add volatile excretions on top of that. You will have yourself a nice little basket of resources that you can sell on the market where necessary. In addition, being nomadic means that you can move your pups towards new planets in case you need to conquer them. And of course, intelligent is pretty straightforward. I do think that this is probably the largest list of traits you can have at the start of the game, and it does get quite ridiculous. I do highly recommend, if you also have lithoids, to try out lithoid necrophages, because it is quite something. Now, just to quickly loop back on the problem of having worlds that are invaded by our necrophages, if we go to this planet here, you will see that we have got stellar culture shock. That means if we want to resettle pops over towards this planet, we are unable to the stellar culture shock. We can still move pops back and forth on that planet, but it's still a major problem. What does this mean? Well, it means that we have a lot of slaves on this planet. As you can see, they are all slaves, but none of the specialists and none of the ruler pops are actually being used, and that is a problem, because as soon as we come in, all of their buildings will be automatically destroyed. We will have a massive amount of worker unemployment, a massive reduction in amenities, and we will have zero stability. Instead, however, it may be an idea to do the following. Get the raiding bombardment stance, which, like I said before, you can get as barbaric despoilers or as nihilistic acquisition, and just start raiding the planet. We should be able to get more and more pops slowly but steadily as we bomb the planet and take pops away. Now, it is also important to know that just because you're going to start out with primitive worlds nearby, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be good. For instance, this world that I have over here only spawned with 10 pops. This world that I'm currently trying to invade only has 3 pops on it. Initially they had 4, but now they have only 3, and that's because I already did a little bit of their orbital bombardment. But still, it's very interesting to see that this is a thing that is in the game, because once again, we got rising unemployment because we decided to invade this planet rather than to just steal pops away from it. And once again, if you are playing this with as a Necrophages, it's a good idea to start capturing pops and moving them back to your capital world, and then build up your base economy, upgrade them to your other pops, then invade the planet, and then move stuff over. It's very useful to actually have that, and it's one of the things you want to keep in mind. Necrophages are very much a mechanically focused origin, and it is a lot of fun. You're not going to get a lot of RP out of it unless you really try, but in terms of mechanical, it is incredibly strong, incredibly fun, and very, very flexible. Thank you so much for watching. This has been an overview of the Necrophage origin. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to go and have a deeper dive into whether or not this game is going to be worth your while soon, or at least this expansion, and be sure to go and check that out. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my patrons for making this video possible. And until next time, remember, what is dead may never die, because we are in fact, well, parasites and not actually dead.